Welcome back, dear brothers and sisters, to our fourth episode from Police to Priest, and to the Advent Week of Joy. I'm your co-host, Father Rix, along with Father Joe. So, if you've been following the national news with the horrors in New Jersey and Columbia University in New York City, I think it brings to mind how difficult it can be for people to find joy in this time of year. Myself knowing people who were connected to both of these tragedies makes it all the more difficult. Communities are rocked and shaken. Tears are shed. Depression can sink in with the challenges of both life and expectations of the season. This is a time of year when people can feel the lowest for countless different reasons, despite being told the opposite. We're told to feel joy in this week, but many of us struggle to get there. Father Joe is going to be sharing a reflection in the wake of the shocking shootout in Jersey City this week, and he tries to reach up to that goal of joy in the midst of challenge and doubt. It's a tough thing to take on and a challenge for all of us at one point or another. I'll just share my brief thoughts of finding joy in loss and suffering. One of the largest questions we ask over and over again is, if God is all-loving, then why does God allow tragedy? It's a toughie. For me, it's not the horrible situations themselves we should try and find answers from. Bad things happen all the time, and we're forced to endure them. It's part of human life and human nature. But the truth that I've seen firsthand in some of the worst experiences that a person can go through is that good things can flower from suffering. It doesn't make the experience any less difficult to process, but things like families or communities coming together to form unbreakable bonds that are going to last their entire lives. Words spoken that would not otherwise be so. Changes in mindsets and lifestyles. All these things can offer the possibility of a new day, and the possibility to feel joy, despite all that's wrong with the world. We all have the power to offer that gift. A smile, a hug, a reassuring look. It can give that light in our soul the spark it needs to reignite the joy we're told in this season. So with that, I'll turn you over to our dear Father Joe, and remember to go in peace, to love and serve the world, and be kind to one another.
Welcome back. This is Father Joe Ciccone here with Father Rix on another episode of From Police to Priest. We are celebrating this week the third week of Advent. In Catholicism, it's called Gaudete Sunday, which means rejoice, and the idea of joy for this Sunday is extremely prevalent. Let's start with the Gospel. Reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. When John the Baptist heard in prison of the works of the Christ, he sent his disciples to Jesus with this question: "Are you the one who is to come, or should we look for another?" And Jesus said to them in reply, "Go and tell John what you hear and see. The blind regain their sight, the lame walk, lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor will have the good news proclaimed to them. And blessed is the one who takes no offense at me." As they were going off, Jesus began to speak to the crowds about John. "What did you go out to the desert to see? A reed swayed by the wind? And what did you go out to see? Someone dressed in fine clothing? Those who wear fine clothing are in royal places. Then why did you go out? To see a prophet? Yes, I tell you, and more than a prophet. This is the one about whom it is written, 'Behold, I am sending my messenger ahead of you. He will prepare your way before you.' Amen, I say to you, among those born of woman, there has been none greater than John the Baptist. Yet the least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he." My dear brothers and sisters, the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. Interesting week here in New Jersey, in the New York City metropolitan area, as I reflect on this gospel reading, and Gaudete Sunday. Sunday in Latin, that means rejoicing. Jesus is talking about John being so important, about John making such a difference in the lives of people. Yet we find John in prison. He was arrested and would later be beheaded for speaking out the truth, for telling people what is the right thing to do, for standing up for what he believed in. I love Jesus' metaphor that the Baptist is no mere reed that can be easily swayed by the wind. He's a desert prophet. He is fearless and forceful. He is the fulfillment of the ancient prophecy, the messenger who comes to prepare the way. In a way, I think that we are all called to be messengers. We are all called to speak out our truth. We are called to be better than we were, better than we can be. Sunday of Joy. As I said, in New York and New Jersey, we have not had a week of joy. A police officer was shot and killed in Jersey City, New Jersey. 20-year police veteran. According to the mayor of Jersey City, he was shot while attempting to apprehend two suspects who had begun a hate crime in a Jewish delicatessen attached to a Jewish school. When I was a police officer, I started out walking a beat. Anderson Avenue, and most of the time it was during the day shift, and sometimes 4 to 12, but day shifts were, in my opinion, back in the day, were a little boring. You had to direct traffic. It was just being visible. And I really didn't like it, those first 3 years of walking a beat back in the day. In retrospect, it was the best time on the police department. I got to know people and business people. I got to help those who would just walk up to you and ask for assistance. You were there where events were happening. The event in Jersey City would have been much worse if it were not for two police officers walking a beat, literally a block away, when the two gunmen stopped the U-Haul truck and opened fire into this Jewish establishment. One of those police officers would be shot. Another would be killed. That detective who valiantly tried to save other people. This is a tough job. One that you don't get to see a lot of joy in. As a cop, you go to places that are in crisis, that are in trauma, that are problematic. The shooting that happened in Jersey City this week lasted several hours. That is normally unheard of for a shootout. Normally it's only seconds. It lasted several hours and thousands of rounds of ammunition. Police departments responded from all over the metropolitan area, including New York City and the Port Authority Police Department. You know, I spoke last week about a near shooting that I was in, and I would use that firearm many times during my 20 years of police service, but I never had to discharge it in the line of duty. I can't imagine all those police officers, what they're going through today, having fired their weapon. There were 6 people killed. My understanding is 3 civilians were killed in the Jewish deli. For a part of the time on the police department, I was the biased crime officer, the officer who dealt with hate crimes, people who would commit crimes because of an innate hatred of many things. It could be persons of color who were the victim. You could be a victim depending on where you were born. In my particular area, the Latino community was often targeted as being victimized by terrible crimes. It could be being victimized by your age. Very often the young and the elderly are victims of crime. But the crime that happened this week is a crime against faith, against people of the Jewish faith. An anti-Semitic crime. What a shame during these high holy days that are to come that people do terrible things to each other. That people have such disdain and such anger and such confusion about something that they don't understand. I often, as a hate crimes officer, attributed a lot of the motives to ignorance. And I don't say that in a mean way. Ignorance being a lack of understanding, a lack of education, never being exposed to a different group or a different idea or a different person. The hate crimes that I dealt with as a police officer in the 1980s were mostly against the LGBT community. I worked as a cop through the whole AIDS epidemic, and I saw so many victims who were part of the gay community receive such hatred from society and from criminals especially because they didn't understand. They didn't have a way of relating. They didn't know. I'd like to think much of that hate is gone. And I'm not sure it is. I think hate crimes are clearly on the rise throughout the nation. Yesterday's crime in Jersey City was completely evident of that. What do we do with that? How do we deal with it? Jesus tells John's followers today, "Go and tell John what you see and hear. The blind regain sight, the lame walk, lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, and the dead are raised." One of the groups that very often were victimized by hate crimes are those with special needs, those marginalized by their ability, whether physical or mental. We have so many homeless people today, and many of whom suffer from mental illness. And we as the police sometimes don't or are unable to even offer any solace or help. Our actions are limited to arresting people who commit crimes, not diagnosing or caring for people who are disabled or mentally ill. It's just another example of what Jesus is trying to tell us. The blind regain their sight. I always wondered why, if Jesus can heal a few, why he can't heal everyone who is disabled. As a cop, I wondered that all the time, because those victims were so often part of my journey through the police department. But I've come to understand that many of these ideas in the gospel, many of these ideas that we're sharing here, are metaphors, especially that first one. The blind regain their sight. One of my former police colleagues asked, "Why are you doing this podcast?" last week. And to tell you the truth, the answer was a little challenging. I said, I want to get the word out. I want to give people a little bit of hope. I want to share some of the stories that have been buried inside for far too long. And maybe younger police officers can get inspired and make a difference and help people. I really tried as a cop to make a difference. And I did for some people. But I also made life very complex for others. Yesterday in Jersey City, New Jersey, the third largest city in New Jersey that borders New York City itself, all the police officers were heroes, even with the thousands of rounds of ammunition that were discharged from those weapons, all done to protect others, to make safety a priority, to help the victims that were inside that Jewish delicatessen. Sadly, that part they weren't successful in. It appears that the 3 victims were killed by the shooters before the police could even get close. But we are there. We're there every day. Last week, I shared my own personal struggle about having to discharge a firearm to take another's life, and how I connected that to sin in my mind many, many years ago. Even though I am adamantly against violence, and the more that we can do to help each other and to be diplomats, to be able to make people understand things in a civilized way, to help the deaf hear, as Jesus tells John's followers. That means to give people hope, to give people a message, to give people an option or an alternative. I do not in any way think that the criminals that were shot by the police yesterday, that those police officers committed a sin. I believe they acted truly heroic, that they made a difference in society. It is sad when anyone dies. There is no doubt in my mind. But how do we live in a society where there is so much hatred, so much violence, so much anger? I think the answer is what this Sunday is all about. Gaudete Sunday, a Sunday of joy. Try to be an example to the world of what goodness can be. Try to be a model to those around you about what joyful life is all about. That's what this Sunday is so critical and so important to think about. that joy is there and can be there in the midst of terrible events. Now I know most of you, including myself, are saying, what about the widow and the 5 children of that police detective that died this week in Jersey City? How do they find joy? Where is God when something like that happens? And that's a tough question. My feeling is God was right there as witness. Witness to that terrible shooting. Witness to that poor detective. I believe that even God who lost his own son, whose own son, Jesus, who was arrested and tried and killed on a cross, God watched that. And maybe that's an example of the first step of getting toward paradise. Because I truly believe that detective is in heaven and will be an angel to his beloved wife, now a widow, and his children. And he will watch over them always. That's the joy of Christmas. That's the hope of resurrection. That's what this Sunday is supposed to be all about. Please, again, add your comments, share your feelings, and if you could, spread the word. You know, the gospel is called the good news, that you're supposed to share it with others. I, by no means, think that I am sharing all good news here, but I'm reading the gospel. I'm reading the good work that Jesus did. And I hope that I'm relating it a little bit to the realities of not only my past as a police officer, but of the future of our world, of a society that needs to understand that love is the only way to continue, that joy is the only hope that we have. God bless you all, and have a great Gaudete Sunday on this 3rd week of Advent.
You're listening to From Police to Priest. Please remember to subscribe, follow, like, comment, and share. God bless you all.